polling stations across the United States, where voters are deciding today who will be their next president. It's an election filled with uncertainty and expected to be one of the closest in U.S. history. Much of the focus today is on a number of crucial swing states that could decide the race. Among them, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. Hello, I'm Kelda Yoon. After an election campaign that saw the incumbent president drop out and his opponent face a would-be assassin's bullet, Americans are heading to the polls today, not only amid expectations of a cliffhanger result, but worries of possible violence. Karen Pauls begins our coverage tonight from Washington.
Around Washington, more barricades, more police presence, even some businesses boarded up. Concern about a repeat of the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. There was a man arrested at the U.S. Capitol Visitor Center Tuesday. Police say he smelled like fuel.
We found a flare gun, a lighter, and a torch lighter in his jacket.
The National Guard has also been dispatched to many states. At some polling stations, there are metal detectors and police officers. Law enforcement using drones to monitor activity around polling places. There are even snipers on standby for deployment. Among those voting today, the Republican candidates for president and vice president, Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. Trump says he's confident.
Look, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. Of course, there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people.
Vance and Trump will watch the election results from his home at Mar-a-Lago. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Washington, getting briefings and doing some radio interviews. She and her running mate, Tim Walz, voted in advance polls. Walz stopped by a diner in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to encourage voters to vote in what he called a free and open election.
And I think the choice couldn't be starker. We saw the closing arguments of one of hopefulness, unity, and a focus on the middle class. The other one of dark, divisive, focused on himself.
Harris will host an election watch party on the campus where she went to school at Howard University. The race remains tight and results could be slow to come in, which means that even when the night ends, Americans still may not know who their next president will be. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Washington.
Among the battleground states, Pennsylvania is regarded as the one most likely to tip this election. Pollsters forecast the race in this must-win state as a virtual tie between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Outside one polling station in the small town of Bensalem, it's easy to see why. Richard Madden is there with a look at how voters are divided.
Well, voting is underway in one of the swingiest counties in one of the swingiest of swing states that's up for grabs. We're here in the Philadelphia suburbs of Bucks County. Voters here could very well determine who wins Pennsylvania and therefore possibly the election. We are told voting has been fairly steady throughout the day. The lineups haven't been too long, but interest is high, and they even have soft pretzels to satisfy some of these hungry voters. Now, officials have said turnout has been steady, voting has been going smoothly, and voters we spoke to here appear to be just as divided as the polls suggest.
I voted for Kamala because I think it's time to lift the glass ceiling, and I think it's great that my one and only granddaughter gets the opportunity to see that a woman can rule this country.
She's not run any kind of company whatsoever. So Trump he's had successes, he's had failures, but you know what? The guy has experience, and that is where I think this country needs to be.
I think there's a difference between what we know as traditional Republicans and what's now being called the MAGA Republicans. So, you know, I'm not in that camp. I think they pretty much kind of like hijacked the party.
Uncle Trump. Uncle Trump.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, just to underscore Pennsylvania's political importance, Vice President Kamala Harris ended her campaign in Philadelphia, holding a star-studded concert with celebrities urging voters to get out and vote. The path to the White House runs straight through this state. So now Americans wait to learn how voters here decided. Richard Madden, CBC News, Bensalem, Pennsylvania.
In their final campaign blitz over the weekend, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump honed in on North Carolina. It's a state that Trump won back in 2020 by less than 80,000 votes. And tonight it is once again one of the battlegrounds everyone is keeping an eye on. Katie Nicholson is in Charlotte with more.
Now, North Carolina is a swing state. There are 16 electoral college votes up for grabs. The last time that a Democratic presidential nominee took this state was 2008. That was Barack Obama by a very tiny margin. And this state really is won usually by tiny margins. And there's a lot of data available this time around. It really shattered early voting records on Saturday. About 57% of registered voters have already cast a ballot. That's about 4.4 million. But even people who've been studying North Carolina politics for decades don't quite know what to make of it and can't really read the tea leaves. Here's Dr. Michael Bitzer. He's a political science professor here in North Carolina.
We've had 17 days worth of early votes, and I honestly cannot read the data coming out of it. It is an even split between registered Democrats, registered Republicans, and the biggest group, registered unaffiliateds, who are really the big question mark in this year's election.
Now, most analysts agree that this state is a must-win for Donald Trump in order to ensure a victory for him. For Kamala Harris, it would be a nice feather in her cap and certainly an insurance policy in case part of the blue wall starts to crumble. Either way, we're going to get a sense of which way North Carolina is going by about midnight tonight. That's because the election officials expect to have most of those unofficial results in, by about 98% of them, by midnight. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Another swing state is Arizona, which has 11 electoral college votes up for grabs. Joe Biden beat Trump there 4 years ago, bolstered by votes in Maricopa County. And that's where Caroline Bargut has been talking to voters.
I'm here in Mesa, Arizona. It is a city in Maricopa County where 60% of the voters in this state live. It is currently leaning, well, the entire state of Arizona is currently leaning toward Trump just slightly, but Joe Biden won it in 2020. There's a DJ here trying to keep things light. We talked to some voters. Here's what they have to say.
Very exciting this year compared to last year.
When it comes to international affairs, who do you think would be better, Trump or Harris? And I think the choice is simple, Trump.
Donald Trump is a racist and he's just crazy, and I don't stand for anything that he stands for. Kamala Harris, I think, is going to try and take us in the right direction.
Trump, he was in for 4 years. The economy was good. He did a lot of good things. He's not perfect. He's a flawed man, but I see him as a much better option than Harris.
Polls close at 7 p.m. local time, but it's going to be quite some time before we actually know how this state voted. Officials are saying between 10 and 13 days before all of the ballots are tallied. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Arizona.
CBC News is the place to be tonight and into the early morning for the very latest up-to-the-minute information on the vote count. Chief Correspondent Adrienne Arsenault will host special live coverage beginning tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. She will be joined by Ian Hannah-Mansing and Paul Hunter, as well as a number of analysts and commentators who will help make sense of the results. You can watch on CBC TV, CBC News Network, and CBC Gem. All right, here at home, Mayor Olivia Chow's executive committee has approved a new plan to build thousands of affordable housing units. The proposal could see the city spend millions to incentivize developers to get shovels in the ground. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords has this story.
Surrounded by construction workers with Liuna, the mayor made the case to spend hundreds of millions in city cash to help incentivize builders. Many of their projects aren't financially viable right now. And she says her plan isn't just about addressing the housing crisis, it's also about jobs.
The data show that housing starts in Toronto are slowing down dramatically. Why? It's because the cost of building is sky high. High interest rates, high building cost. So hardly any builders are building, which means less work for these workers standing with me today, and fewer skilled trade and construction jobs for people in Toronto.
The union says it's seeing the impact of the housing construction slowdown firsthand.
That sector, particularly a high-rise over the last year, has seen a precipitous decline in the number of sales and starts. And so anything that can get construction moving again, we're supporting.
The mayor's plan would establish an indefinite deferral of development charges on purpose-built rental, estimated to save builders over $37,000 a unit. It would cut property taxes by 15% for 35 years, about $20,000 a unit. The city says the full incentives plan, including foregone taxes and fees, saves developers just over $97,000 a unit. But some in the building community say the city should cut more fees and taxes.
I don't want to sound unappreciative, as this is certainly, definitely a step in the right direction, and we thank you for it. But I really think it falls short. I think it could be better.
The vast majority of rental and condominium projects, which in their totality are a vital part of the city housing solution, will not move forward under this program.
But with annual deficits over $1 billion, Toronto's budget chief says there are limits to the incentives the city can provide builders.
To come forward and say, we're not buying it, it's not enough, you should do more money. You have to know, if you are doing business, that the magnitude that the development industry is functioning in this city, you have to know our situation.
The mayor says once the proof of concept is established, the city will approach the provincial and federal governments for help. That could get another 13,000 units built.
Councillor Carroll is absolutely right. This is financially, we're stretching ourselves. We know that. We're taking a leap of faith, so to speak, to prove that we can do this.
And with her executive committee convinced today, the mayor will have to turn to city council next week, hoping they'll also take that leap of faith with her. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
New developments today in the battle over our city's bike lanes. If Premier Ford's government moves ahead with its plan to rip out 3 major sections of bike lanes in Toronto, the city is demanding the province foot the bill for their removal and the initial installation. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has the details.
It's a lot of money.
Toronto City Manager was on CBC Radio's Metro Morning. He says adding a bike lane isn't just about painting the road and sticking in some dividers.
These are separated bike lanes, so there was significant work done in infrastructure, as well as all the planning and stuff, which, quite frankly, I'm not prepared.
Like, what's a lot of money? Because the province...
Multi-millions.
The province wants to get rid of at least sections of the lanes on Bloor, Yonge and University, then possibly others.
If reimbursement's on the table, which it appears to be, then it's full of reimbursement for what we've done.
CBC News asked the Transportation Minister about this.
We're going to reimburse the removal of the bike lanes.
But he didn't clearly answer whether they'll pay for other costs incurred.
It's pretty clear to me that the cost of this isn't a concern to Doug Ford, right? He is just doing this to distract and divide people at any cost.
And now the government is fast-tracking the bill that includes changes for bike lanes, meaning less time for the committee responsible to hear from the public and less time for politicians to debate the bill.
I'm in a very short legislative session. Tomorrow there'll be 4.5 weeks left in the session, and I've got to get those priority bills passed, and we've been clear that that's a priority bill.
However, the session is so short because the government took an extra long break over summer, almost 5 months. With the government's majority, you can expect the bill on bike lanes to pass before Christmas. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Colette, hard to believe it's November with these temperatures today. Not that I'm complaining.
Yeah, I don't think anyone, or at least I didn't hear any complaints. But yeah, some extremely mild temperatures that we're experiencing. Came close to a record for Pearson, didn't quite get there, although we had other records in other communities, including Windsor, which now has cooled down to 21 degrees, but was up to almost 24 there. I thought we'd kind of look, just because it's such an important day with the elections stateside, and a couple of states not too far away from us, which really can play a role, like Pennsylvania. You can see just how mild things are there for folks maybe waiting in lines at the polls. Mild conditions across Michigan as well, another important one. However, some changes there having to do with this cold front, and that bringing in the rain, at least to western parts of the state. And that's going to be working its way in our direction as well here in the GTA. So some wet weather to come through the overnight hours, although it should be pretty brief and not a lot to it. Let's dive in for for a closer look at some of our temperatures, where it's still 19 in Oshawa, even with the sun setting or being, dark earlier. Kitchener 19, a lot of mild readings. Mississauga and Toronto at 21, and Uxbridge there at 20 degrees. And yes, a humidex on the 5th of November. We're talking humidex. It's not extreme, but you probably could feel it in the air. And also, I'm sure you could feel those winds, very strong at times, gusting 50, 55 kilometers an hour. And now we're seeing those gusts have all backed off. But that southwesterly flow in terms of the direction really is what helped with the temperatures. We certainly saw the clouds thicken up, although closer to the lakeshore, certain communities had a little more sun for a little bit more of the day than you saw elsewhere, with those clouds that are just preceding this front. So once the front comes through, it is going to have an impact on our winds, and we will start to cool down. But tomorrow is still going to be mild, just not as mild as today. In terms of the timeline for this, it will be through the overnight hours that the rain passes through. Should be dry by tomorrow morning. It's early commuters. You may get a little bit of wet weather on the roadways, and then we'll even see some of those clouds breaking up as we go into the afternoon hours. So becoming a pretty nice day, although winds out of the west 20 to about 40 kilometers an hour. In terms of the amount of rain, you'll see not much here, 1, 2 to maybe 5 millimeters passing through those overnight hours. And then there you go. After a low tonight of 17, yeah, the low. 19 for Wednesday for the daytime high. Then we cool down, still above seasonal at this time of year. Seasonal daytime high 9 degrees, so still above seasonal. Thursday, Friday looking good, and then cooling down a little further into the weekend.
Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
Welcome back. The murder trial of Alpha Henry continued today. He's the Toronto man charged with second-degree murder in connection with the killings of his parents, along with the attempted murder of his brother. Both Alpha and his brother Daniel called police for help that night, accusing the other of murder. Chris Glover explains what's come up at trial so far.
Emergency, do you need police, fire, or ambulance?
Can I get a cab? Can I get a police to 27 Bergamo?
Around 1:45 a.m. on September 21st, 2022, a frantic 911 call from Alpha Henry.
My brother came back from flying, and he came to murder me and my parents.
You hear him repeatedly accuse his flight attendant brother, who just returned home from Japan, to his family's Etobicoke apartment.
And he just started to stab us. And now there's blood everywhere. And he put my parents in the washroom. And I'm bleeding. Pardon?
Okay, all right, we're going to get some help for you, okay?
Police! Get on the ground!
Get on the ground! Police body camera footage was played in court.
Got 2 bodies in the tub.
Showing the moment when officers find 67-year-old Veronica Henry and 68-year-old Colin Henry dead.
There's no gasoline, so be cautious. Yeah.
An officer testified when police entered the unit, the smell of gas was so strong they had to open windows.
They've obviously dumped gas in.
Yes. I think the bathtub was, they were submerged.
They were murdered this morning, and you're facing 2 counts of first-degree murder.
Why did that funny?
I'll explain to you.
In Alpha Henry's video interview that day with homicide detective Michael McGinn, Alpha said his brother Daniel burst in and started stabbing his family.
He started attacking her. Like, what? You not seeing it? And he started attacking me from behind it.
Then Detective McGinn turns the blame on Alpha.
Sorry? What do you believe? I believe that she killed her parents.
First poking holes in the events from inside the apartment, particularly how Daniel could have had enough time in the violent scuffle to move both parents to the tub.
If your brother comes in and then all of a sudden he runs out, someone say you run out there. How'd they get there?
Then poking holes in Alpha's timeline leading up to the killing.
There's surveillance photographs of the incident that occurred. This is probably what you say. This is just when you bought the gas. That's why I asked you about the gas cans when you bought them. You do see, I had one back. Of course you did.
A big part of the Crown's case, using security footage to debunk Alpha's timeline, starting with video from September 18th, showing he was escorted by police out of a boiler room he'd been living in near Kipling and Steeles. The next morning, on September 19th, call logs confirm he called his mother's cell for 24 minutes from a payphone at the Rexdale Mall. A few minutes later, video from his parents' apartment around the corner shows he followed another person into their building, takes the elevator, and walks the halls before ultimately leaving to go back to the mall. Call logs show a second 37-minute call to his mother's phone, ending at 11:20 a.m. Moments later, just before noon on September 19th, he arrives back at his parents' place and someone holds the door for him again. The Crown alleges it was at this time, not the early morning of September 21st when the 911 call came in, that Alpha killed his parents. And Veronica Henry's call log appears to back up that timeline. After rarely missing a call, the one with Alpha that ended at 11:20 is the last. More than 30 calls after it are never answered. About 3 hours after Alpha goes inside his parents' place, he's seen throwing bags in the building's garbage bins. Then he's spotted filling a gas can at a station around the corner. When he returns with the gas can, this time he uses a fob at the back entrance. The next afternoon, September 20th, he returns to the same gas station to fill up again, returning to his parents once more using the fob. At roughly the same time that afternoon, his brother Daniel returns from his work trip to Japan. He goes directly to meet friends and heads to the movie theaters. Just after 1:30 a.m., he goes home to his parents where he also lives. The Crown argues Daniel found Alpha inside the apartment, and there was a brief scuffle until Daniel wrestled the knife off his brother and ran. By 1:40, Daniel got to the same gas station where Alpha had filled up the cans. The Crown says Daniel had another person call 911 from there. Remember, that's basically the same time Alpha's 911 call was being placed back at the apartment.
Can I get a cab? Can I get a police?
For murder and attempt murder, you have been arrested.
Of who?
Sorry?
Of who?
Yeah. So it's my duty to inform you.
Of who? Of who?
Court saw video of Alpha's apparent confusion in his hospital bed shortly after being arrested. In court, his lawyer cross-examined the homicide detective about efforts to see whether Alpha was on medication or had mental health issues, while Alpha himself has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Violence outside of a Hindu temple in Brampton last night. It was the second straight day that police were called to break up a protest that turned ugly, with videos of the violence once again going viral on social media. Greg Ross has more.
Hundreds of people spilled onto the streets in front of the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton Monday night. They were captured on video, blocking the road, kicking cars, and clashing with police.
They got the information that the Khalistan group is coming from the other places, like they are coming from Alton Gurdwara.
This group was predominantly people affiliated with the Hindu temple who had gathered earlier in the evening.
Basically, it was a meeting. That what happened, people want to come and say, we are together, we are united, and any hate in this country is not acceptable.
Both Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown and a Sikh advocacy group say the group tried to head to a nearby Sikh place of worship. At this Malton Gurdwara, many Sikh Canadians gathered, some armed with swords.
There's a threat to our safety, and we're not comfortable, and we don't feel safe at all. Sikhs were peacefully. We're at our place of worship at the Malton Gurdwara, just patiently, waiting to see if anyone came to attack.
The violence between the two sides ramped up over the weekend after members of a group called Sikhs for Justice protested outside the Sabha temple.
This is not a fight between religions. This has nothing to do with Hindu against Sikh. This is typically because they had an event that was held by Indian diplomats, and that's why we were there initially to protest.
Diplomats from the Indian embassy were there helping Indian Canadians who were preparing documents. But the Sikhs for Justice say those diplomats should not be here after it was alleged by the Canadian government and the RCMP that embassy workers participated in the killing of a Sikh Canadian.
Yeah, I think it is the explosive nature of the allegations that have been made against the Indian state, as well as the strident dismissal of those allegations by India. And many, not all by any means, but many.
In a statement, Peel Police said that some demonstrators were observed throwing objects at cars and other people. Police say they also saw some of them carrying sticks that they believe could be used as weapons. Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown says this has gone too far.
And disperse it. We have the right to protest in Canada, but that right does not allow for violence, intimidation, and harassment. Enough is enough, and I hope to see those individuals who are agitating violence charged, arrested, and prosecuted.
On Monday, Brown filed a motion with City Council to ban any protest near a place of worship. Greg Ross, CBC News, Brampton.
Toronto police are asking for help in locating a missing 33-year-old woman who hasn't been seen for more than a day. Officers have set up a command post in Etobicoke in hopes of finding her, adding that she has serious health issues that require medication. Ali Chiasson reports.
This is a level 1, so basically all hands on deck.
The woman they're looking for is only being identified as Sarah. She's 33 years old and has health issues that could be life-threatening without her medication.
Mounted's here, Marine units here, canines here. We have ATVs out, and we're doing door-to-door checks for video and any information where she may have been seen.
The terrain is also rough around here, with ravines and the Humber River near the old mill. She was last seen at 8:30 Monday morning, walking through the Park Lawn Cemetery.
If people that live in the area can check their backyards for anywhere that Sarah could have found shelter overnight, as she has been missing for over 24 hours.
Sarah is from the United States, and she's been in town visiting family for the last couple of weeks, so there's a chance that she doesn't know this area or the city all that well. She is known to frequent thrift stores, coffee shops, and the police have alerted the TTC to look out for her in case she's spotted on public transit.
Obviously, if they can approach her, ask her name, confirm it, contact the police at 416-808-2200. That would be the best course of action.
Sarah is described as black, with long, straight hair, 5 feet tall, heavy build, last seen wearing a blue winter coat and black winter boots, and wearing gold necklaces.
Any type of video, any sightings that they have, to get hold of us as soon as possible. We are working against time.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
York police are searching for suspects after a home invasion in King Township last night that left one person with gunshot wounds.
Officers learned at the scene that the residence was broken into by 2 armed suspects. When the male, who's not associated to the residence, attended to assist the homeowners, he was confronted by the 2 armed suspects and was shot.
The victim, a 39-year-old man, was taken to a trauma center with serious but not life-threatening injuries. The 2 suspects were last seen fleeing in a pickup truck. The incident happened in the community of Nobleton shortly before 6:30 p.m. yesterday. Anyone with information is asked to contact police or Crime Stoppers. And York police are also searching for these 2 suspects who threw Molotov cocktails in the lobby of a Richmond Hill movie theater. Police say they attended the scene near East Beaver Creek and Highway 7 on Sunday night just after 11 p.m. for reports of a fire. The blaze was contained to the lobby. Police say there were occupants in a second-floor theater, but no one was injured. A suspect vehicle has been identified. It's believed to be a gray Acura RDX, which was reported stolen in Toronto late last month. And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX rose 132 points, the Dow climbed 427 points, and the dollar traded up at 72.18 cents US. We will be right back. All right, polls have begun closing in parts of the U.S. in what is expected to be a long night. Many will be watching the election results with bated breath. Let's go to our Dale Manukta, who is at the Albany Club for one of many watch parties across Toronto tonight. And Dale, things there getting underway shortly.
Yeah, that's right, Kelda. As you can see behind me, the Albany Club is decked out in red, white, and blue. The stars and the stripes, all for this United States presidential election. In one corner, we have Donald Trump, who I've seen people take some selfies with his cardboard cutout. I want to get my microphone away from him because if anybody watched his rallies over the weekend, you know he's got a complicated relationship with him. On the other corner, we have Kamala Harris beside the USA sign, looking to become the first female president in United States history. Now, Kelda, this watch party was organized by Navigator, a public strategy and communications firm. Every 4 years, Navigator hosts a U.S. election watch party on election night, bringing together business leaders, advocacy workers, and Canadian politicians to watch and react to what's happening south of the border. We caught up with Executive Chairman Jamie Watt.
Let's have some fun. 24 years ago when I first started this, I realized that all of our friends would be working on Canadian election night. So I got this idea, why not have a U.S. election night party? And it's just grown into this crazy party over the years. And people love to get together and watch the results come in and have just a great time.
Now, I notice, Jamie, we have Fox News and CNN here. Where's CBC?
Well, I knew that was coming. Well, it's an American election, so we're going to the American networks to cover the American election.
Wouldn't hurt to have the Canadian lens on the American election here.
You're right. You know what? I'll find a TV and I'll put CBC on it.
Kelly, I had to plug CBC's coverage, which you can catch on all of our platforms. Now, this watch party won't officially kick off until about 7:30. By that time, polls in Georgia and North Carolina will have closed. 2 of the 7 swing states that everybody's got their eyes on, along with Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Now, Georgia and North Carolina both have laws in place that should allow them to count mail-in ballots fairly quickly. So we should know, or could have a strong idea, who won those 2 southern states between about 10 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. unless it's too close to call. Now, CBC Washington correspondent Alexander Panetta, he says if somebody is able to sweep those 2 states, then they'll be in commanding position. I'll encourage our audience to check out his election primer. Alex lays out a bunch of different scenarios in which either Trump or Harris can get to that magical number of 270 electoral votes. He also says that we could know who the next president is shortly after midnight. That's because Pennsylvania counties, by law, must declare how many mail-in votes they have left to count. So we'll be all eyes glued. We have a lot of Canadian politicians coming through tonight, including Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow, Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, and Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy. But if I see him, I'm just going to ask him when we're going to see another election here in Ontario. We'll send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Dale. Dale Manukduk live at Albany Club tonight. Around the world, people are watching the election results very closely. A return to the White House by Donald Trump could mean uncertainty for European diplomacy on trade, on international cooperation, and on Ukraine. Crystal Gamansing has more from London.
When it comes to the economy, there are fears that Donald Trump would move ahead with that universal tariff on all American imports. That, if it is about 10%, would have a huge impact on the European economy. The EU says American imports are worth about $500 billion US. When it comes to having a stable, reliable partner, there is a lot of talk about how unpredictable Donald Trump was during his 4 years in office. Kamala Harris is seen as someone who would be potentially more known, more stable, given that she would follow in the footsteps on many issues to Joe Biden, particularly when it comes to security and NATO. Donald Trump has said that he might not protect all of those in the alliance who don't commit to that 2% GDP spend when it comes to military spending. We did hear yesterday from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Germany offering some comforting words.
We will work with Kamala Harris, we will work with Donald Trump and make sure that the alliance stays united, because they know that if Putin would be successful in Ukraine, that at that moment an emboldened Russia is on our eastern flank and will present a direct threat to NATO territory.
Germany is the second largest contributor to weapons to Ukraine as it fights for its sovereignty. If the United States either chooses not to work with NATO in those typical defense measures, as Trump has suggested he might do, or if they choose to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, that would have a knock-on effect, and Europe at this point says it just can't meet that demand. Ultimately, it is in the hands of American voters. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Many in the Middle East are also holding their breath. Arab media is reporting that many Gazans fear a victory for Trump could spell disaster for them. They're concerned his support of Israel could lead to more residents of the enclave getting displaced. While in Israel, most people hope to see the former president return to the White House. Sacha Petrusik takes a look at what's at stake for the region.
Most Israelis are pretty
confident that they want Donald Trump back in the White House. They think that he was a good friend to Israel back when he was in power before, and they say that he will back Israelis fighting in the wars in Gaza and in Lebanon. That's because of several statements that he has made, and there's a feeling that he just doesn't want to get involved here. Polls that have been done in Israel suggest some 66% back Donald Trump, only about 17% back Kamala Harris. Why? Well, some say here that they just don't know her, they don't know how she's going to react. Others say that they feel she is somehow anti-Israel because she has raised humanitarian concerns and concerns about how many civilians are being killed in this fighting. In any case, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has made it very clear that he wants Donald Trump back in the White House. He wants to deal with him. I spoke to a former Israeli diplomat in New York who had this to say about how things would go with the two different candidates.
I think that both candidates, Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump, would ask him to terminate the war as soon as possible. Now, if Trump asks him to do that, then he will reach some accommodation and announce a victory. If Kamala Harris does that, he will vie for a direct confrontation.
But what happens if Netanyahu does not end the war before Donald Trump takes office, if he wins the election? Well, that's what people here say they're unclear on, and they think that Trump is a little unpredictable that way. On some days, Trump has said that Netanyahu should do whatever you need to do, and has praised Israel for what he sees as victories in the war. On other days, he has told Netanyahu in no uncertain terms that Israel has to finish this war by January 20th, when Trump takes office if he is elected. And even if Kamala Harris wins, it's not clear if she will in fact take the same position that Joe Biden has, or if she'll take U.S.-Israeli relations in a whole different direction, which would have a huge impact on the whole Middle East. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A group of MPs held hearings today on an issue that could not be more divisive, recognizing a Palestinian state. Today, there were arguments from community groups on both sides of the issue. Raphael reports.
The committee is resuming its study of Canada's advancement of a two-state solution.
It was a proposal so controversial, the Liberal government MPs who presented it initially did so behind closed doors. But today, the emotions were out in the open.
As a Palestinian today, I feel we've overlong due waited. We suffered so long. We paid the price for being recognized.
Until Palestinians can wrap their heads around and accept the legitimacy of a Jewish state as their neighbor, we are condemning the region to conflict.
For decades, successive Canadian governments have maintained a Palestinian state should only be recognized after a negotiation process between Israel and Palestinian leaders, leading to peace between the two sides. Earlier this year, following months of deadly war between Israel and Hamas in and around Gaza that's seen tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, there was a change.
We now recognize that it may happen sooner than at the end of the process as a way of pushing towards that two-state solution.
But such a move would amount to rewarding Hamas, say many Jewish advocacy groups, for the attack the militant organization launched in October of last year, killing 1,200 people in Israel and taking some 250 others hostage.
I think that any state which wishes to be formed, and the basis for that formation has been an act whereby its citizens, including UNRWA employees, go in, burn, rape, mutilate, and butcher people. I don't think they're quite yet ready.
Others, though, accuse Canada's silence on statehood so far of contributing to what they call impunity for years of occupation.
And we believe that Canada's recognition of a Palestinian state would constitute an important step toward actualizing the right of Palestinians to self-determination.
This UN expert says that would indeed be just a first step. Her description of Israel's actions have landed her in hot water with the country's officials and many Jewish groups.
Is Canada spending any of its political capital to make sure that the genocide ends as soon as possible?
Officials from the Foreign Affairs Department will be meeting with the MPs studying statehood later this week. Raphael on CBC News, Ottawa.
There is a newly minted toonie in circulation, the first of its kind created by a group of Inuit artists. The coin was unveiled by the Royal Canadian Mint at a ceremony in Ottawa today. Sandra Abma has this story.
It was an occasion of Inuit culture. Drum songs and throat singers performed by youngsters and elders, captured by students on their cell phones. The unveiling of a new $2 coin, designed by Inuit artists, celebrating the myth, the land, and water of their northern homeland, Inuit Nunangat.
I've never held one just before today.
Graphic artist Tumas Magiot was excited to finally get his hands on this brand new piece of metal, which he helped design. It has a sea blue center swimming with spirits and whales, walrus, and Arctic char.
This represents our belief, our core belief, how we grew up, our perspective on how we should live in the nature, and our closeness to the waters. And I'm happy to share things from the Inuit culture, Inuit stories, and this will be one of them.
Why we have a community and how we care for our community is wrapped up and enveloped within our storytelling.
Natan Obed is the president of ITK, the national voice for Inuit communities in Canada. He's proud that a work of Inuit art will find its way into Canadians' pockets.
First and foremost, it is that we see ourselves within day-to-day life in Canada. So I could be at a Tim Hortons in Belleville and get change back and see an Inuit Nunangat coin.
Sandra Abma, CBC News, Ottawa.
All right, Colette, you've been keeping track of these warm temperatures, the forecast, but you're also keeping track of this tropical storm, right, Raphael, that's about to make a landfall tonight?
Well, yes, having an impact on a few spots. You're right about that. And yes, I'm keeping track of all these warm temperatures, but also the warm waters. And, you know, this is why, just a reminder to everyone, the hurricane season in the Atlantic actually goes to the end of November. So this isn't terribly unusual, and it's not that unusual considering what's been happening this season so far. So yes, here we are with Tropical Storm Raphael, and the winds right now at 110 kilometers an hour, moving to the northwest at just under 25 kilometers an hour. And so yes, what Kelda's talking about is, having an impact with landfall towards the Cayman Islands, but this is going to be moving on along western side of Cuba as we go through about the next 12 hours, and those winds strengthening. So yes, it does become a hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane, as it moves into the Gulf. Still very warm waters there, but I think it's going to encounter some wind shear, so we'll be watching carefully as to where it will go next. Obviously, it will be having an impact on U.S. mainland at some point there. Now, our warm temperatures, 21 degrees. I mean, today we were up to 23, but the record is 25, so we had a ways to go. There were some other records broken, though, across the province. We do have the rain showers, though, moving our way. And, you know, they'll move through pretty quickly, take a few hours to go through, and going through in the overnight hours. Early commuters could have some wet roads, and especially that would be very early and farther east in the GTA, but otherwise we'll be drying out and even clearing out somewhat into the afternoon. So becoming a mix of sun and cloud, and then never mind a mix, it's sunshine as we go into Thursday. So we'll have some very nice conditions, but by Thursday, the temperature's really coming back down, at least closer to where they should be at this time of year. A few millimeters to 5 millimeters with this front going through. The low tonight, a very mild 17 degrees. And then tomorrow, the winds not quite as breezy as they were today out of the southwest. They'll be more from the west, up to that 19 degrees, 12 on Thursday with sunshine. And we'll get some sunshine right through to the first half of the weekend. Hey. And then, Kelda, rain comes back for the second half of the weekend.
It's inevitable. It comes and goes, right?
There you go.
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, everyone.